Hey, this is Adam from Cleavr. In this video, we're going to take a more detailed look into Cleavr's new load balancer solution. You can see I've already created 3 servers here, App Server 1, App Server 2, and the load balancer. And what we're going to do is add a site to App Server 1 and 2, and then have the load balancer direct traffic between the 2 servers. Of course, to add a new app server or a load balancer is pretty easy. On the top right, click on Provision New Server, and where it says Server Type, for a load balancer, you'll want to select load balancer. For an app server, you could click on app server or choose between one of the different optimized server settings. For load balancer, you can see that we're using HA proxy, and this is in place of Nginx. Not because Nginx isn't capable of doing a load balance server. They actually do have a solution, but it's more of a premium service that is kind of an expensive cost. HA proxy is an open source solution, and it does a really awesome job at managing a load balancer. All right, let's go back here to our server list and start adding our sites. Just click on the ellipses on the far right, click on Add Site. And for app type, I have a sample application that we're going to use, and I created that using Nuxt. So we're going to select Nuxt SSR. And for the domain name, you could actually use whatever domain name that you want, even if it's one that's not real and it's not going to render. But I do recommend using one that will actually render. That way you could more easily just see the site on a specific server. So you could use one of your custom domains or just use a temporary domain. And you also don't have to worry about installing SSL on the app server level. We'll do that on the load balancer. Okay, let's click on Add. And that's going to add the new site to the server. And while it's doing that, let's jump over to App Server 2. And do the same thing here. Click on Add Site, and then select Nuxt SSR, and we'll use a temporary domain, and then click on Add. Okay, now that we've added a site to the different servers, let's just click on the pop-out real quick to see what we currently have, which is a landing page. It says you've successfully added your Nuxt SSR site. Awesome. Now let's configure the load balancer to direct traffic between the 2 servers. We'll click on Load Balancer. And first thing we want to do here is also create a site on the load balancer. And of course, we're going to select the Nuxt SSR type. And then for domain name, I have one already set up called bouncer.cleavr.cloud. And for this one, I will install FreeSSL. And this will be the Let's Encrypt SSL. If you want to use a custom cert, then deselect this and click on Setup. And then after the site has installed, you could go back in and add a custom certificate. But we'll install the free one. And under advanced options, we have the option to enable stats. This is something that HA proxy provides. They have a stats page. You can see information about the load balance server. And it will be available at this URL provided right here. And it will also be behind an auth gate. So we could select a username, and I'm going to type in admin, and password will just be password for this one. And then click on Setup, and that's going to create that site on the load balancer. Now that the site on the balancer is created, the next step is to link up the servers. To do that, click on Actions, Link Servers, and then we'll click on the ones that are available, App Server 1 and App Server 2. Of course, if you're spreading your application across even more servers, then you would just add those here as well. We'll click on Update. And then once that updates, we can see that App Server 1 and App Server 2 with the Nuxt SSR apps that we've created are already here. So you might ask, why did we create an app of Nuxt SSR at the load balancer level? Well, this is one reason why we did it, is because we check the servers when they're linked, and then we link up the same app types from those servers to make it just a little bit easier for you when you're setting up a load balancer. And also what this does is it creates a web app within the web app section right here, which is configured for that particular app type. So a Nuxt SSR app type is going to have specific configurations compared to a Laravel app type, compared to a static app type. And we make it just that much easier again by asking upfront what kind of app it is that we're going to deploy to a multi-server architecture. And then we get a lot of the stuff ready for you so you don't have to configure it yourself. So those are 2 of the biggest reasons why we asked for the app type when creating a site on the load balancer itself. All right, cool. So we have App Server 1, App Server 2 with the different sites all associated to this load balancer right here. let's go ahead and click on this pop-out button. And what we see here is the Cleavr landing page for our next SSR site. If I click on refresh, I'm assuming I'm probably on the different server, but let's go ahead and deploy out the web app that I created because it's going to let us know which server we're actually on. X out of this tab here and then go to the web app section. So again, this bouncer.cleavr.cloud was created right after I created the site on the load balancer. And if we look into the network section, we can see that all the servers are already tied together. We have the load balancer, we have app server 1 and app server 2, as well as the sites that they're associated with. And if we browse a little more, let's click on deployment hooks. We can see for each of the deployment hooks that both servers are represented. This allows us to deploy an app to a multi-server architecture. So it's going to copy the project on each of the servers, run npm install, it's going to build the app, and then it's going to activate a new deployment. If we also wanted to include a database server to the mix here, what we would do is add the database server to the network area, and then in deployment hooks, let's say if we wanted to migrate server, we would put that command in here, add the bash script, and then only really one of the servers needs to run that command. You don't need both to run that same command because that would be redundant. We would just have one run that command, click on add, and then move that into the appropriate place within the deployment activities. But we don't really need that for this particular app that I created, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. But that's what you could do if there was also a database in the mix. Let's go to the settings tab and then to code repository. I'm going to connect to my GitHub account, and I'm going to connect to the repo that I created called bounce example right there, and then update that to save that information. And then from here, for this particular app, I want to go to the environment tab because there's a couple variables I want to put on each server. So for a lot of applications, you might have the same exact env file that you want to use for both. In this case, you could sync it with both servers, but I want to do it one at a time because I'm going to have slightly different variables on each server. For app server 1, I want to include server with the text app server 1 and a little Giphy image that I found with this source URL right there. And I'm going to save that, or sync it rather, with app server 1. And once that's synced, I'm going to toggle over to app server 2 and add my variables for app server 2. And then sync that. Okay, let's go to deployments and deploy this out. Okay, it looks like the app has completed the deployment process. Let's go back to load balancer and then check the results. I'm just going to pop out bouncer.cleavr.cloud. And check that out. This is the app that I launched. So from the env file, it's taking in the text right here, app server 1, as well as this image. So if I refresh this page, I should expect to see app server 2 come up at some point. So I'm going to refresh, and it comes up right away. And then refresh again, and again, and again. And you can see that it's kind of just toggling back and forth between the servers. That's because if we go back here and then click on actions and then configure bouncer, the default setting for bouncing algorithm is round robin. So that's going to hop between the servers for each request that comes in one at a time. Other options would be least connections. So it'll see which server has the least amount of active connections, and then it will direct traffic to that server. As well as source, it's going to take the IP of the incoming request and try to keep that IP on the same server. It's kind of another way of being sticky, and is an alternative to this enable sticky sessions, which this actually drops a cookie, and then will keep the person on that same server as long as the cookie is being able to be detected by the load balancer. Let's see what that looks like. Let's click on update, and then go back to our app and refresh. All right, so it took us back to app server 1. Let's refresh again. Okay, so now since we have the cookie dropped, I'm expecting this to be sticky. Because if we click on this right here and then look at the cookies under bouncer right here, we see that cookie that we dropped right here. So it sees that cookie and it's going to keep us on the same server. Let's try it again. App server 1. All right. Let's go back to the load balancer, and let's also take a look at our configure bouncer again And I want to grab this for the stats site. And let's take a look at that. I believe it's admin and then password for password. Cool. So here we see the stats for the load balancer. We see app server 1 and app server 2 down here. So the more configurations and control that you have over your load balance servers is, let's say we want to take down app server 2 for maintenance, or maybe it just breaks or whatever it might be. You could click on the ellipses on the far right and then click on disable. And that's going to disable this app server, and all traffic should just go to app server 1. So back on the stats, we could see that this is now kind of colored with a brown background. That means the server has been disabled. Let's go ahead and re-enable that. And then take a look at our stats, and you can see that it is re-enabled. So this is the stats page. You could feel free to play around with it more and view the different stats that it has to offer. And really, that's all that I wanted to show you with this load balancing tutorial. If you have any questions, please drop a comment down below.